Hello, folks, and welcome. Today, I'm happy to welcome again Steven Sampson-Jones, visual coach and the founder of the Visual Facilitator. Steven, give me 1 second. I will enable one setting that I usually forget to enable. Yes. Now you can unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
Amazing. Thank you, Alex. And yeah, it's a pleasure to be back for the second time. Alex, if you could just let me know that my audio, video, and everything else is coming through loud and clear, right?
Yes, I can hear you clearly, and I can see your screen.
Amazing. So yeah, I don't want any of that. Oh, you're on mute before I get kicked off. So thank you very much, Alex, for that lovely introduction. And yeah, it's great to see so many people on the call this evening. Whilst I share some of my tips and tricks in terms of visual thinking and a really powerful tool that kind of went viral when I shared it about a year and a half ago called the Manual of Me. And I really want to share some templates and some of the benefits around that on how people can replicate that yourselves. So a little bit about me. So I'm Steven Sampson-Jones. I'm the visual facilitator. I'm also a public sector consultant within UK government. I love drawing and illustrating. So you'll see that style of mine throughout this slide deck in terms of all the visuals and all of my own sort of personal Manual of Me commissions that I've done for the wonderful user-centered design and agile community amongst education as well. In terms of what makes me sort of credible in this space, so I'm one of the top creators on Miro for sharing retrospective and agile templates, and I was voted the People's Choice Award the Miro retrospective templates last year, which I'm quite proud about. So I'll take that. But today I'm going to talk to you about Manuals of Me and how you can produce these types of artifacts and why they're important, and how you can kind of build your own. For instance, not everyone has a background in graphic design or a passion for drawing and illustrating. So this is just a couple of different examples of what it looks like. So in terms of what Manual of Me is, it's just a cheat sheet to you. So like a user instructions. So whenever I join a new project, a new company, a new commission, or even just like introduce myself to a new group of people, it's a brilliant way to kind of like get out in terms of how you like to work, what your preferences are, and just give people that little bit of insight in terms of this is how people can efficiently work with you. But like I said, I'm going to give you a load of different templates and cheat sheets in how you can do this yourself. I'm sure there's some wonderful visual thinkers like myself on the call, but yeah, you don't have to have a passion for drawing to be able to do things like this. So without further ado, some of the benefits in terms of Manual of Me, like why should you use one, and how are they going to be useful in your line of work. I'm hoping there's a good breadth of people here, whether there's educators, people from the agile community, designers, researchers. Looking at the participant call, it's great to see a good mix of capabilities joining us this evening. But personally, for me, one of my sort of favorite sort of benefits in terms of why I do this is that it really helps improve that self-awareness. So I've been speaking to a lot of people within the sort of neurodiversity community, and enabling people, it doesn't even if you don't have a sort of neurodiverse needs, but enabling people to be able to articulate their preferences and help build that empathy with colleagues or peers or students. It's a really useful tool, just getting people to have a think about, well, what do I really need? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? And how can I reflect on that and articulate that in a way that's going to really help me integrate into the team and help inform some of those ways of working conversations. It's also a really good way of being able to communicate effectively. Again, like everyone's probably moved jobs or joined different project teams. And like I said at the outset, I always use my user manual, which we'll see shortly, just as a good introduction to the team, to my peers. It gives me a good sort of artifact to be able to communicate to others. And for instance, my user manuals are very highly visual. There's something quite primitive about sort of storytelling and visual thinking. I even go back to sort of that cave times, like that was the way that people and humans told stories. And like even like Steve Jobs, another great Steve, one of my favorite quotes of his was, the most powerful people in the world are storytellers. So I think being able to communicate visually is really important, but that doesn't work for everyone. Some of the sort of research I've done in this space, so there's a really good study in Canada, the University of Waterloo, easy for me to say, where participants of that study found that 85% of them were able to retain information visually compared to 10% written versus 5% spoken. So hopefully if you even if people are drowning out my voice, I'm hoping you'll remember some of the visuals. But I think manuals are me, and especially making them visual is a really good way for people to engage with them, to remember people's preferences 3-4 months down the line once you're embedded into an organization or in a class or on a project. So it's a really good way just to structure your thoughts and provide that information to others so they can digest it easily. And like I alluded to at the beginning, it facilitates empathy, right? And I think that's the main thing. And the reason why I use manual me's for every engagement as the number one thing that I do is that it just avoids that friction at the outset. Like the only times I've ever had projects or products or services that have gone wrong, it's normally because there's internal team dynamics that are sort of bubbled to the surface. So like being able to get them out in the open really quickly and right at the outset is really useful. And I'll give you an example. The most common one is like people that might have sort of caring or guardian responsibilities. They might be more part-time than others. So being able to understand there's different needs there and different time pressures for those people. You know, I've worked with people that are dyslexic, and there's been friction in the past where people might be pressuring them for the way that they write or digest or read information. So being able to articulate that and build that empathy with your peers is really important. And you know, I have my own needs in terms of like sort of mental health and child school runs, and just being able to give people a sort of snippet into my life that's going to affect the way that I work and interact with people. It's brilliant for facilitating empathy and nurturing that sort of inclusive environment that all sort of multidisciplinary teams or classes, if there's any people from the sort of education sector, really sort of strives for. And again, for me, like one of my favorite sort of bits about the manual me is that it's an artifact that kind of reduces anxiety. So again, even if it's not mandatory, so like normally when I work with teams, I normally do it hand in hand with a team charter, which I'll show you an example of shortly. But there's no pressure on people to be able to articulate their working preferences or their sort of communication styles. So what I like to do is just capture them. People have the floor and being able to create that psychologically safe environment where people can share, but they don't have to. And even just being able to write it down where people can just read in that session, whether it's 10, 30, 45 minutes, and it goes in the bin. Ideally, it'd be great to capture those things in team charters or Confluence or Notion or a wiki. But again, it just helps participants. And a lot of the feedback I get is that it's reduced their anxiety, where they didn't have to say anything. They were able to write it down and display those preferences and their own distinct needs with their colleagues without having to have those awkward conversations. So again, like kind of comes back to visual thinking and how much of a powerful tool it is, where what I like to call like drawing out loud and giving people that sort of platform and that asset to be able to do that. So it's brilliant for that as well. And again, it kind of goes hand in hand with the empathy point, but just being able to create manual with me is where you enable people to say, well, here's how I like to get feedback. Like here's how I like to communicate. Here's my working pattern. Here's what to be aware of. Like, how do I learn best? Like, what sort of distinct needs do I have? And again, by writing that down, or for me personally, drawing it, it just fosters that inclusivity by enabling people to be able to share those diverse needs and hopefully, especially as a delivery manager and agile coach, allowing people to sort of acknowledge and respect that. And it kind of comes back to that psychological safety point. And lastly, before I just show you some examples, I think that's what everyone's here for. It just really boosts confidence. So I think, like, especially if you're starting out an engagement in a class, project, organization, if you've got something that you're proud to display and showcase, it's a really good way. Like, I think when I shared my own manual with me, I think it had something like 5 million views across like a 3-month period, which is quite scary. But again, it kind of gave me that confidence that, you know, that it's a cross-sector tool, like anyone can use it. You know, like I found out that my daughter's just recently started school, and they actually use something very similar for 5-year-olds, and it's not a new technique. And I'm going to show you some of the other examples on how you can do that. But I think personally for me, having a tool and having a manager really allows me to be confident and knowing that I can work best with my peers because they know a little bit about me. And then finally, and I kind of touched on this point just a second ago, it's been around probably for about 10, 15 years now. For those, some people even in their own primary school, especially in the UK, there's something called a one-page profile. And I completely forgot about it. And I was looking back at some of the LinkedIn comments before, and someone mentioned that. And yeah, I've got a good example of that as well. And it's just really interesting that why were we using this every year in school? And as soon as we go to our sort of working lives, everything's got to be plain and boring and business-like. So yeah, I quite like being able to capture that sort of inner creativity, which is really cool. And again, all of this stuff goes into the Tuckman model. So for those not familiar with this is the sort of pathway, and it's not by no means linear, sort of high performing teams. So the way that I like to introduce user manuals and team charters, I think personally go hand in hand, is right at that forming stage. So more often than not, like there's no, I'm not saying that if you did that, there's no chance of getting to the storming phase, but there's a big, it really de-risks and mitigates that friction that you're going to find later down in the project just because someone doesn't understand someone else. So by building that empathy at the outset, it gives you a good opportunity to kind of bypass that straight to norming, in my experience anyway. And again, this was just an example of how I would use that in a workshop. So I'd spin up a Miro board or a mural board or FigJam or a whiteboard, whatever people use within their respective organizations. And I would get them to do the manual with me as an icebreaker. So I'd share the templates, and I'm going to share those with you shortly as well, complete them ahead of time. And what it's going to do, and what's so useful, is that it's then going to inform your team charter and your ways of working. And the reason why I do that, there's no point setting, I don't know, for instance, daily syncs or daily scrum, daily stand-up, whatever people call them, at 9 o'clock in the morning if we know that half the team are on the school run. Or, you know, maybe we book all of our retrospectives or show and tells or show the things on a Friday where we know that 20-30% of the team have a non-working day or they're traveling back home, for instance. So I really like to take what I learn out of those manual with me's and help influence how the team's going to be set up at that outset. Or if I come in midway, is there friction because there's distinct needs that aren't being met that we can easily tailor and accommodate? And a really good example of this, I was working with someone, Tech recently, on a defense project, and her thing on, you know, things I struggle with was around public speaking. It's not particularly my favorite thing to do. Like, you know, it's quite easy doing it remote. I'm just having a chat to myself, right? But her thing was public speaking. And that was something I was able to sort of coach and mentor and support this individual. And then fast forward 3 months, they were presenting to some of the most senior people in the defense sector in the UK. And it's just really good just to be able, especially as an agile coach, being able to support, mentor, teach, and sort of nurture people and try and, you know, alleviate some of those struggles and see how we can support. And that's not always possible, but I think knowing what people struggle with and if there's anything we can do to facilitate, that's really good. And this was something on the right hand side of my screen, was something that I come across quite recently. I can't remember the chap's name. He's the head of product at Roblox. And what I want to start introducing this into my user manuals, and I think it's quite interesting. For every superpower, there's a shadow. There's a positive to every, or there's a negative rather to every positive. And For instance, I'm probably, quite good at storytelling through drawing and visuals, and I probably don't get into the details enough. But I think this is quite a good way, again, just for people to have that self-awareness and that reflection. And again, maybe that's something you could share with people, or Myers-Briggs profiles go quite well as well. So again, this is where it gets interesting. So I'm going to show you some examples and some of the sort of tips and tricks in terms of, going back to my earlier examples, how can you replicate that yourselves, right? So I want it to be open source and free and easily accessible for people to replicate. So this is my manual me. Like, this is kind of what kickstarted my visual facilitator journey, and like I said, it gave me that confidence to build a brand and share my knowledge and do a lot more talking and taking on commissions, which has been great fun. So if you wanted to create things like this, I use an iPad Pro with an Apple stylus. The app that I use is something called Procreate. So it's an iOS only app. There's plenty of other Android or Windows tools that you can use. Like Procreate, for instance, is £10, one-off fee. And yeah, I personally like it just because if I make a mistake, I can easily remove it. And it's not as difficult as it potentially looks like. All of these are just basic shapes, basic line work, and then just lots of like 90s like nerdy nostalgia, which I spent ages doodling as a child. But you don't have to be someone that's passionate about that. And I'm going to show you a couple of different sort of examples here. So, one of my favorite people within the cross-government delivery community, probably the favorite, in case Barry is on the call. So this is Barry's user manual. And what makes this so unique is that he drew it on a flip chart paper. So it's really big. And what he did, and I wish I could do this because I haven't actually done that today, but on his background on Microsoft Teams or Zoom, you could just display that. So you could put it on your wall or a flip chart or a whiteboard if someone are lucky enough to have nice remote working spaces. And it's just a great way for people that you're chatting to be able to take in your working preferences and those bits and pieces. And like I said, on the little post-its, that's perfect for workshops, and you can carry it around with you. And, super simple to do. So if you ever get a flip chart paper at home, or next time you're in the office, like, have a crack at it. That's completely free. Some of the tips and tricks, if you're using it. So like, for instance, like you see a lot of the shading. So like you would normally use chalk or crayons. I'll say that with an Essex accent, but it's a really quick way just to be able to like color in stuff really quickly. But yeah, the most tricky bit, I guess, is drawing quite big, but it's good fun. And this is probably the most easily accessible manual of me. So this was Swati from TPX, good friend of mine, and yeah, I absolutely love this visual on how she replicated my one using Canva. Completely free tool. And what I like here is that, it's a ready-made format in terms of she's used similar prompts to what I've used, easily accessible, right? But the thing that I like what Swati's done is that she's taken Google Images, or you can use Shutterstock, like royalty-free things or icons, and dragged and dropped them into her template. And the reason why I like this one, sorry, just have a little mini drink break, is that she's used transparent backgrounds. So she's got like a beige background, but if you start copying and pasting images in that you find online, it will look terrible if you have like big white backgrounds. So like, I would always recommend people to use transparent backgrounds, and it kind of gives you that same effect to what I've done, and it has the same, it's the same benefits, right? That people that don't digest information via text or verbally, they can replicate and remind themselves of the visuals, or maybe there's bits that you can emphasize here. I love watching Netflix and like crime documentaries. I love tennis. That's probably my sort of passion outside of work and family. Yeah, I might not look at it, but I quite enjoy going to the gym and listening to music. So it's just things that help build that empathy and those conversation starters amongst your team, and especially remote, where you might not have those water cooler chats. So Canva is a really, really good way. And as you can see, these types of like templates can be mocked up in 20-30 minutes quite quickly. And then Accels from Drawify. So it's free to sign up. It's absolutely brilliant tools. There's a ton of other visual facilitators and visual thinkers and graphic recorders and sketchnoters that provide their visuals for this tool. I think there is a more premium service, but you can sign up for free and you get access to lots of different templates and free visuals. And this is one of them. So it's a Miro add-in. So like it's really quickly, you can just search different icons. And again, there's a free template and you can just drag and drop and bespoke it to your personal needs. So again, lots of different free tools that still have the same effect to what I do in my sort of hand-drawn illustrations. And then, like I said, like the manual me's have been around for a long time, firstly through primary schools in the 90s in the UK. So I'm sure there's people from various other European countries on the call that might have encountered this elsewhere. But Management 3.0 have had a similar concept called personal maps. And it has the same effect, right? You know, so just essentially a mind map of you. So this is Stu's, for instance. So he's got his Myers-Briggs profile there. He's got his work history, he's got his education, his family. And it's quite nice just to be able to branch off and people can kind of resonate and map out their own needs and their own bios that they wish to share at work or, you know, with their peers or whatever context you'd wish to do that. But again, it has the same effect. Like you're building empathy, you're getting your needs across, and you're helping to connect with other people. And then this is probably the most important bit, and I kind of alluded to it earlier. Like not everyone's going to have the psychological safety to go, do you know what, put that on the company intranet. That's not what you want to do. So like if people want to throw their manual me away once they've shared it, or even if they just want to talk it out loud, that's absolutely fine. So you got to make sure that you're not making people uncomfortable. But one organization I was working with, they were using Notion, and I thought it was just a really cool way where you can put everyone's user guides or manual me or whatever you'd like to call them. There's lots of different terms for this. And people could just be able to look up, like, you know, Control F, you know, who else is into reading? Like maybe want to do a book club, or who else is into tennis or movie trivia for this. So again, it's a nice way to keep it visible and add to it and remove it as team shapes, you know, kind of goes through that Tuckman model of norming, storming, performing, and eventually adjourning. And then this is the one-page profile that I alluded to. So this is something my daughter started school about 3 weeks ago now, I think, maybe 4, losing track of time. And the first thing they do is, you know, share a profile, what are the things that I love? What are my hopes and dreams for the future? You know, what ways do I need to be supported in my sort of transition from nursery to primary school? So it's quite interesting that it works for all ages, all sectors. You know, you don't have to be a business professional. And it's just quite interesting that it's used very widely in the education sector for such a long time. So and I think this is kind of why when I shared my visual last year, it kind of resonated with people. So maybe a lot of people have done this before, but there's a load of studies from Department for Education and other sort of charities that suggest that, you know, by being able to frame this information, it enables teachers in particular, or teacher assistants to be able to, you know, tailor their sort of learning styles, or tailor learning to their students' learning styles. So again, it's just, yeah, it's been around quite a long time. And then I've got some links as well for all of you. So I'm going to stop presenting a slide deck in a minute and just give you a sneak peek of some of these. And so I'll kind of work backwards. But my favorite Miroverse template is by a lady called Lizette Sutherland. I think she's part of the Facilitator Academy. It's really cool. So for those that use Miro, you can just click create template and you can drag and drop different images and different prompts in. So I'll show you that in a little bit more detail very shortly, but it's really cool, really visual. You could do what I've just done here and just take a snippet of it, put it in a slide deck, or share it with people quite easily. The one that's probably been around the longest is manualofme.io. So it used to be by Leaper, but it's just a text-based one. So again, like a lot of people do think like that, then not everyone's the same as me and has that same need of drawing and illustrating. But it's great because you can tailor the questions and you can just write it in and export it into a PDF. So I'll show you that shortly. Just have a quick water break. One of the ones that I don't really see a lot of sort of recognition within the various communities I engage with is one by Atlassian. So the folks behind Jira and Confluence. And they have something called playbooks. And the reason why I quite like this is that they've got a standard Microsoft PowerPoint and, of course, Confluence template. And it allows people to be able to just download that and just like literally just update their information, drag and drop a GIF. It's a really, really cool way of doing it. So I'll show you that again in a minute. And I think this is probably the bit that sort of I started introducing this as part of my own delivery playbook. So Cassie Robinson, she was a researcher in GDS or government at the time in 2017, shared her template off the back of a chat at a conference. And this is kind of what I sort of took as my inspiration for doing the visual way. I was like, oh, this is brilliant, but there's a lot of text there. I can't remember it. What would it look like if I just drew headphones or space or family? Would that resonate more? So this is pretty much what I've modeled my own templates on. And Cassie's one's 6-7 years old now, and this is still brilliant. And you can download the Word document and the Dropbox, and I'll share with Alex and the team lead Sky folks all of these links so people can download them at the end. And Emily Webber's done something very similar through TaxHit. So again, similar prompts, and there's lots of different ways where you can kind of use these prompts work well, and she's kind of just visualized them in a different way. And then there's ones on GitHub for engineers, which is quite good, where people can just be able to just copy and paste and just update it as part of their sort of team wikis or team APIs or team charters. And Management 3.0 have jumped back on the bandwagon. So since people have been talking more about this particular tool and framework, they've come up with personal collab cards, getting completely free, goes hand in hand with those mind maps. And yeah, it's just a really lovely template where you can just fill in your preferences. You can see this one, for instance, got WhatsApp, Slack. It's not as visual, but it looks nice to look at, right? So I encourage people to have a look at that. So I'm hoping out of all those different templates and different tools and techniques, there's going to be something that resonates with you and the people that you work with. Before I take any questions, I'm just going to show you what some of these look like in practice. So this is that Mirrorverse link that I kind of alluded to by Lisette Sutherland. So again, just super simple, where you can just put your name in, you can put your ideal workspace. Like I said, Drawify is brilliant. So like you just literally search for Drawify, install it in your workspace. Obviously, I don't have it here. And you can drag and drop the images in. I'm most productive. Again, you can just drag and make it as interactive as possible. Communication preferences. So I really like this kind of like drag and drop sort of approach. It's super quick, and it kind of really helps resonate with people. So that's a really, really good one to use. This is the Leaper manual of me. So you can just literally just answer the questions like this. So you just add your answer in. There you go, type it away. You can change the questions, and then once you're finished, you can download it and share it with your peers. Let me just go back. So I've got the big zoom bit right in the way on my screen typically. There it is. Cool. This was the Atlassian playbooks. So you can see like, here's what they have. So conditions I like to work in. You can just fill it in with bullet points, put your images in, what I need to do a really good job, ways in which to communicate with me. So again, I really like this one. I like the way of being able to present that back, provided it's completely optional. You don't want to put people on the spot, but again, that works quite well. This was Cassie's one. There's Emily's, and there's the personal collab card. So I'll share all of these templates at the end so that everyone has them. And yeah, open to take any questions for you to moderate, I guess, Alex.
Thank you very much, Steven, for sharing all these amazing tools and templates, and the whole idea of creating a manual of me was an aha moment for me. Today, because I'm just starting working with the new team, and that's the next thing on my list to do after today's talk. I see that there are a lot of questions in the chat, so I would suggest us to stop the recording and move on to the with the discussion.